This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome. You've heard and read the spin the media and the politicians have put on the issues of the day. To get the correct spin on what's going on in North Carolina, let's introduce you to our panel of experts. They include former legislator, Representative Linda Coleman, John Hood from the John Locke Foundation, Chris Fitzsimon from NC Policy Watch, and political and PR consultant Chris Sinclair. Well, this week on NC Spin, we review a testy confrontation between DHHS Secretary Aldona Vaush and legislators and ask whether DHHS is being micromanaged or just poorly managed. We also discuss a potential transportation crisis over the loss of federal transportation funding, and Charlotte's political scandal is certainly a topic worthy of debate. And we conclude our show, as always, by asking our panel to tell us something we don't know. Let's get started. The Department of Health and Human Services Secretary Aldona Vaush told a legislative committee her agency has been in crisis mode since day one. She reported that until a late problem in Guilford County arose, it appeared the state would be able to retain federal funding for food stamps. She also said while data is coming in slowly, it appears the Medicaid budget cost overrun should be contained to around $140 million. In a testy and rare exchange between an agency head and lawmakers, Vaush said her department was being micromanaged. But legislators, especially Republican Senate lawmakers, grilled her on the running of her agency. Mentioning the Medicaid reform proposal, Senator Harry Brown said, "How can we as a General Assembly feel safe or comfortable you can implement a reform package when you have all these problems?" Linda Coleman, you served in administrative positions in state government as well as 3 terms in the legislature. As I say, I think this was a fairly unusual exchange between people of the same party, particularly. What do you make of this? Does this signal more problems ahead between the legislature and Health and Human Services?
Well, it could, and let's throw in there unmanageable too. Because of the sheer size of Health and Human Services, the structure just really allows for the creation of some of these issues. And I can remember a time when Carmen Hooker Odom, there was some exchange, but perhaps not as testy. But we have to remember that she serves in an appointed position while the legislature is an elected position. So therefore, there is some responsibility, especially when it comes to oversight of the management of these state agencies. They have the appropriations and they have a responsibility to make sure that the money is being spent as it was appropriated and that it's being managed well. There are some things that perhaps are happening that will signal that there may not be as much of a waiver coming down because of the cost of this. And it's very difficult to determine what that budget is going to be if you don't have all of the information.
Well, and Chris Sinclair, I think the question is, Secretary Vaush has been at the center of controversy almost since day one. I think the question is, can she survive all of this?
Well, I think that if you look back and see what she inherited, these problems they've had with the computer system, the fast track, getting Medicaid numbers, that she did inherit a crisis in that database and that software that they've been trying to use to track Medicaid. So I can see where they could get a little testy. And the good news is we have checks and balances. That's why we have the legislature. They're frustrated. They want to get teachers their salary pay increase. And they need to know what the Medicaid numbers are to do the budget. So I could see where they get a little testy. But look, this is all healthy part of the democratic process. But she inherited a mess.
No question about it.
Well, with all due respect, she inherited a mess, but she's kept it a mess. We haven't had a director of Medicaid for 7 months. Carol Steckel was highly celebrated, came here. She announced she was leaving in August. She left in September. We don't even have a director of Medicaid. She's had 7 months to do that. I don't believe that the Perdue administration said hire former campaign aides and give them huge raises, or hire somebody from your husband's company on a $310,000 contract, or hire a woman to run early childhood development who didn't believe in public early childhood development. I could go on and on and on the rest of this program. And I think she is in big trouble if the Republican leadership of the General Assembly doesn't have confidence in her. The Democrats clearly have been after her. Now the Republicans are asking her, can we even trust your department? And this is a person who works for the head of their party. I think she's in big trouble.
Don, I think the real issue here is, okay, let's just assume Secretary Vaush can't survive this, and she leaves. with all the turmoil that's going on over at Health and Human Services, wouldn't that create even more problems?
Well, obviously, if that were to happen, and I'm not convinced that it would, but if it were to happen, that would be a very challenging transition. I think they would find somebody that would be able to do it, and they'd proceed. The legislature's impatience is understandable. The difficulty with both what the Secretary Vosh and her team inherited and the problems that have occurred since then, it's understandable that lots of people, lots of the public are frustrated. But I think actually the action here is going to be, if there is any, is going to be on the Medicaid reform initiative, because that is what legislators had assumed was going to save a lot of money. And what they've done is they basically diminished expectations about how much money that would save, which was probably wise.
Well, and even a step before that, Linda, and you've been in there during this period of time, the legislature's got to come in and relook at the budget and revise the budget. And Chris said they want to give teachers a pay increase. But with the numbers that they've got right now, they don't have any clue as to, and I mean, Secretary Vosh said, and Revenue said it might be $140 million, but then they put a caveat to it saying, but we don't know. This could be a real problem for the legislature because they're coming back next month.
And there was no communication. That's the other thing. If they had known, perhaps they could have looked around and said, where can we find the money, or can we replace this? Does your agency have the money? But there was absolutely no communication, which made it even worse.
And not even that. I mean, the legislators, Republican legislators, were mad that the department knew they weren't going to be able to realize some savings that the Republican legislators built into the budget, and the department didn't tell the legislators until recently, and they knew it months ago. So they are not communicating.
Elder Chris, is this going to affect the Medicaid reform that Linda talked about?
Well, it certainly has the potential of having an impact, but I don't think it has a significant impact because they're not going to be able to address Medicaid reform in the short session.
All right. That's your prediction?
Yes.
All right. Remember, NC Spin is now being aired on Time Warner cable systems, except in the Raleigh-Durham area. To learn the exact time and channel listing, you can consult the ncspin.com website. You can also watch NC Spin anytime you want to on Time Warner On Demand or on the ncspin.com website. We post each week's show on Friday, so view us anytime you like. And while at ncspin.com, be sure to sign up for our free weekly email newsletter Spin Cycle and follow us on Twitter at NC Spin Tweets or on Facebook on NC Spin. We want to hear from you. After these commercials, we're going to talk about transportation crises.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
The slogan on our family farm is growing the next generation. It means using innovative technology to conserve water and increase yields. It embodies our passion for providing food and fiber for our neighbors near and far. It represents our desire to take care of our employees, our land, and to leave a better place for our children. Farm life isn't easy, but it's a good life, and I love what I do.
Every year, North Carolina patients undergo 635,000 same-day surgeries. 72% of these surgeries are performed in our highest-cost hospital facilities, adding as much as $2,000 to every procedure. The state's outdated Certificate of Need law prevents competition from lower-cost, higher-quality same-day surgery centers, inflating healthcare costs and limiting patient choice. Tell state lawmakers it's time to lower healthcare costs now. It's time to make a simple fix to an outdated law, increasing patient choice and lowering healthcare costs now. You can help. Visit reformconnow.com and tell lawmakers it's time for a simple fix to an outdated law. It's time to lower healthcare costs now.
Meet the candidate that public policy polling has shown to have the best chance of defeating Kay Hagan this fall.
While Mayor of Shelby, we cut the crime rate to its lowest rate in 30 years. We created jobs and economic opportunity in an otherwise stagnant economy. I plan to bring the same trust, experience, and determination as your U.S. Senator from North Carolina. I'm Ted Alexander, and I approve this message.
We now return to NC Spin.
At a recent forum on transportation, Governor Pat McCrory sounded a warning that North Carolina's federal transportation dollars could dry up this summer if Congress fails to rescue the potential bankruptcy of the National Highway Trust Fund. His remarks reignited the debate over how to build, maintain, and fund our state transportation network as our state grows by 100,000 people a year. Chris Fitzsimon, Governor McCrory promised in his inaugural address over a year ago that he's going to be submitting a 25-year plan for transportation. He said the same thing at this forum. We're now 15 months into the administration, and some are saying it's time to stop talking and get on with the plan. What do you think?
Well, I agree. I do think it's time. I hope the governor will come up with that soon. There's a couple of things going on here. One is the inability of Congress to, as you mentioned in the introduction, to authorize, in effect, the highway transportation bill to give states their money. It's difficult to plan, but that's not a surprise that they're having trouble doing that. I think they'll eventually do it. The larger issue, and I expect another reason why they're having trouble coming up with a 25-year plan, is that, as we've talked about many times here, transportation revenues are down. The gas tax simply doesn't bring in the money it used to bring in. I think everybody around this table and in North Carolina knows we need to figure out a new way to fund our highways, but it's one of the most politically potential landmines. Hard for any politician to come out and say we need more money or even a new tax.
Well, Chris, one of the things that came out of this and a recent Board of Transportation meeting was the proposal to at least test the idea of a vehicle miles traveled kind of system of funding roads. How does that sound? What are the chances for that?
Well, I don't know what the chances of that are, but what I can tell you is to address this issue of the vision, the 25-year vision. You look at what the department has been working on. They've been working on the equity formula. They're very strategic in how they think in the Department of Transportation. Tony Tata, former Mayor Nick Tennyson, they sit back and they've methodically picked off and done the things they think that are important all along working on this vision, this 25-year vision. But let's put the first things first. They had to get this equity formula done. They're instituting that, and they're not going to get any sort of buy-in again in the short session because there's going to be nothing major consequence taken up in the short session.
I hear what you're saying, but there's a time lag between being proposed and being implemented. John, isn't it time we started getting this plan put together?
Tom, you question the issue of vehicle miles traveled, and ultimately I think it would be difficult to disagree that it would be better to charge people for the miles they drive rather than the gallons of fuel that they buy. We taxed fuel for 100 years because it was a rough approximation of how much people drive.
Right.
But that's not as true as it used to be because of fuel efficiency and so forth. So in theory, if you could charge people according to how much mileage they drove instead of charging them at the gas pump, that would be nice. The real problem is the implementation of that.
Yes.
The more technological solution that sounds elegant is unpopular among many because of the potential privacy concerns. On the other hand, if you
by the way, that means putting a GPS type of
which lots of people already have. It's called a cell phone, but they don't quite understand that. So they think there's a privacy concern, and there would be if the government has access to where you go all the time. But the other thing would be, if you didn't do that, you do it at the odometer level when people are renewing their annual registration. The challenges there you have are people drive to North Carolina who don't register a vehicle here, people who drive here but also drive in Virginia. It's a complex issue, but we're going to have to work our way through it.
Linda, other states have had this same problem that North Carolina's had. Virginia just recently revised their funding formula. Mm-hmm. Among other things that they did was increase the sales tax on vehicles that are being sold. Mm-hmm. There's some thinking that perhaps maybe that won't raise enough money to really make that much difference. But there's also a suggestion perhaps we put forth a statewide bond referendum and borrow money to jumpstart some of these road improvements. What do you think of that?
Well, actually, I think that this needs to go into a study committee because there's so many ideas. We've looked at
we've studied it over and over and over again.
Years and years, and I think that the miles driven is going to be met with a lot of resistance. Sales tax is always met with resistance. Whatever you do is going to be met with a lot of resistance. A decision is going to have to be made because we've got to have the infrastructure to drive, to go to the places that we need, and it's just going to be a very difficult thing to do.
Chris, we've been doing this television show now a little over 15 years. I would venture to say, I didn't go back and research it, but I'd venture to say we've been talking about this same topic now for 10 years. We've had study commissions,
25-year plan.
Just about. We've had blue ribbon study commissions. We've had all kinds of discussions that have gone. Are we ever going to get to a point where we know a plan and move forward?
Well, I think we will. I don't think it'll be in the short term. I certainly don't think it'll be in an election year. It's going to have to be some sort of bipartisan business community being very active, similar to what happened in 1989 with the Highway Trust Fund. It's going to have to be that sort of buy-in, or the people aren't going to just want to.
But John, during the short sessions, they say we can't do it this session because it's a short session, and then after the election is over with, well, we can't do it this session because
it's a little bit further along than that, in my opinion. There are two solutions we haven't talked about. One of them is tolls. Right. Which is already happening and is already moving forward in Charlotte. Another is to free up money from the highway fund that's currently being transferred to the general fund to pay for the highway patrol, things like that. So if you could free up a couple $100 million a year, maybe do a bond or maybe have a pay-as-you-go, there are some solutions here that aren't as heavy lift as trying to do an odometer fee or trying to raise the gas tax, which I think would be very difficult to do.
The logical first step in that was to get the politics out of the road building business in terms of bridges to nowhere, roads to nowhere.
And you're saying we have done that?
Well, I mean, we certainly have gone down that road.
I think there's some progress. I mean, I served on the DOT board. I understand something about all of the decision-making over there, and I think it is better, no question. Uncoupling the funding formula was another big step. But like I say, we've been talking about this now for better than 15 years. I think it's time to get moving on it. After these messages, we're going to come back and talk about the scandal in politics in Charlotte.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
An experienced leader who knows how to get the job done. Keith Crisco. As North Carolina's top job recruiter, he helped bring 120,000 jobs to our state. And Keith Crisco will use his experience to help create more jobs. The first member of his family to graduate college, Keith Crisco will fight for our public schools, community colleges, and universities. And he'll protect Social Security and Medicare for our seniors and generations to follow.
I'm Keith Crisco, and I approve this message.
It's a fact. Patients who receive care in the medical home from a trusted family physician reduce health care costs through prevention, early detection, and affordable management of high-cost chronic diseases.
Every dollar invested in health care matters. Let's invest them wisely, building on North Carolina's medical home model. Better health begins with a medical home, a trusted family physician, the best return on our health care investment. Learn about the importance of medical homes at ournchealthcare.com.
The cost of everything has gone up dramatically over the last 75 years. With one exception, keeping electricity affordable. That's the power of your co-op membership. Learn more at togetherwesave.com.
North Carolina's Touchstone Energy Cooperatives, looking out for you.
We now return to NC Spin.
The news that Charlotte Mayor Patrick Cannon had been indicted on charges he accepted tens of thousands of dollars in bribes spread across the state faster than the proverbial speeding bullet. Reminiscent of the movie American Hustle, Cannon was part of an investigation that began in 2010 and included other targets in the Queen City. Cannon had only been mayor of Charlotte 4 months, but was forced to resign, touching off a contest to see who was going to replace him. Chris, there are a lot of questions in this investigation. If it started in 2010, why did it take so long to come to an indictment? Was he a victim of entrapment? And why does it seem only Democrats are indicted? And how's this going to affect Charlotte? What's your take on all this?
Well, I think that when the feds come or the FBI comes to the feds with a case of alleged corruption, it's pretty airtight. I mean, there may be some going back and forth between the U.S. prosecutors and the FBI. In this case, I'm sure they were very methodic. They're not going to move on anything with public corruption because the standard is very high. You talk to U.S. prosecutors, they've got to prove a lot. And this whole question about why didn't they do something prior to the election if they started in 2010? Imagine if they had done something prior to the election, and for some reason it went wrong. The allegations weren't true, whatever. So I think that they played their cards very wisely in terms of taking their time to have an airtight case to take, so they can take it to prosecution.
Linda, what's your response to whether or not Patrick Cannon was a victim of entrapment? There are a lot of people saying, "Hey, wait a minute, they're only going after Democrats, for Pete's sake." What do you think?
Well, I can't say that they're only going after Democrats, but I do think that it's unfortunate if he did use the mayor's office for personal greed, and I certainly don't think that represents Charlotte's values. As far as entrapment, it's very difficult to say because as I've been told many times, you have to be presumed innocent until proven guilty. But I do agree that generally when they come in and there's surveillance and they've got you on tape.
Since 2010.
It's pretty airtight.
Yeah. John, there's some suggestion that this is going to run pretty deep. We're not told very much about who else could be involved. From your standpoint, do you think more political people?
Well, there's speculation that maybe some city staff members might be still subject of investigation. And it was interesting when the initial indictment came out in the round of press coverage, there were a lot of city council members and other public officials saying, well, the mayor is a ceremonial position and we have a strong city manager form of government, and so there's really not very much corruption that could happen. Some of that sounded to me a bit defensive and a bit nervous, but I don't think we're going to find, large-scale indictments of the rest of the city council or anything like that. But I do think there are other people involved, clearly, in a pattern of conditioning city favors, and frankly, some of these giant construction projects like the streetcar and the rail, where people came forward and said, I'm going to support these folks, and they had in the back of their mind, that way I get to make money.
Chris, it's up to the city council now to appoint an interim or a replacement for Patrick Cannon. They had a meeting this past week and couldn't come to some resolution on it. Why is that, and who do you think are the leading?
Well, I think there's a lot of candidates, but I think in my mind the two leading ones are State Senator Dan Clodfelter, who had flirted with running for mayor in the past, and former chairwoman of the county commissioners Jennifer Roberts, who ran for Congress unsuccessfully, has a petition campaign, a petition campaign, a Facebook campaign. She's doing all sorts of those things. There are other candidates, but I think that one of those two is likely going to be the next mayor.
I think what John said is very interesting, because if you read today in the Charlotte Observer, the U.S. prosecutors have now subpoenaed the entire city. I mean, they are every computer. I mean, all his cell phones.
They're trying to keep files from getting erased.
Yes.
All right. After these messages, we're going to ask our panel to tell us something we don't know.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
Nobody ever imagined a mammogram machine being subject to CON law. If I want to invest our business dollars into technology that I think is going to benefit my patients, my customers, we should be able to do that. I think it's time to take a law that was intended to protect the citizens of North Carolina and now is harming them, and change it. I'm Dr. Bruce Schroeder, and I support CON reform.
Visit reformconnow.com.
It's true. Farming is different than it was 50 years ago. We know consumers have questions about how our food is grown today. North Carolina livestock farmers want you to know that they're using the most responsible and caring farming practices to feed our state.
NCAnimalAg.com.
We now return to NC Spin.
All right, now it's time for what is becoming the favorite part of our show for a lot of our viewers and listeners. When we ask our panelists to tell us something we don't know, they get to choose the topic and sound off on it a few seconds. John Hood, we'll start with you. Tell us something we don't know.
Tom, Republicans in North Carolina feel optimistic, more than optimistic, about the U.S. Senate race against Kay Hagan because of her high disapproval ratings. They feel like if the election were held today, they would win. Democrats have not given up, and they've got a strategy. part of the strategy is to replicate the 2012 process of turning out the Democratic vote in a very sophisticated way. And the second part of the strategy is to not so subtly elevate Mark Harris, talk a lot about Mark Harris, even attack Mark Harris for being so much against gay marriage. The idea is to strengthen his support among Republicans, get enough vote for him to force a runoff.
Linda, tell us something we don't know.
Well, I think Senate Dems have done such a great job with recruitment of candidates that they'll pick up 4 or 5 seats in the November election, bringing the total to about 21 to 22, thereby really positioning themselves well for 2016.
Does away with the veto proof anyway. Chris, tell us something we don't know.
Former DA in Wake County, Colin Willoughby, went into the private sector. I hear his first client is
Duke Energy. Yes. I understand it was a very big retainer involved in that. Chris Fitzsimon.
The Republicans are scrambling a little bit behind the scenes, not just about what to do with teacher pay in terms of how much to pay them, but how to address the tenure issue. There was a law passed that a teacher could get a long-term contract if they got $500. There's only affects 25% of the teachers. There's a proposal now to move that up to 40% of the teachers.
Well, you've heard our spin on the issues of the day. Stay informed all during the week. Give your feedback. Read our column. Be sure to visit our website, ncspin.com, or catch NC Spin on Facebook. Next week, we've got a really special show for you as 4 of North Carolina's best journalists will sound off on today's issues at the Reporters Roundtable. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
Join us next week and get the spin on issues facing our state.